Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of the Titanforge podcast. My name is Dratnos, and joining me this week is Tettles.
Hello, Dratnos. I'm Tettles. Depleter of medium to low level keys, and
first of your name.
I guess I'm an MDI caster. Yeah, first of my name, exactly.
Mm-hmm. For anybody who doesn't,
live from the kitchen.
That's a nice place you got there. I see. You're in Columbus, Ohio.
So we got an apartment. It's me and Zyronic. He's taking a nap in the back. Maybe he'll be wandering around at some point.
Ooh, that'll be an exciting, an exciting guest appearance. One guest who's not appearing this week is Trell. Trell is busy practicing for the MDI that is this weekend. So yeah, we're still kind of figuring out exactly what our cadence of episodes is going to be for these MDI weeks. This week we are going to release early so that we can get ahead of the MDI. So we'll be out the day before the MDI starts this time. We're not sure we'll keep that going forward, but that's what we're doing this week. And, stay tuned to our Twitter and stuff where we'll try and announce this stuff, but we kind of are figuring it out on the fly ourselves. And hopefully we'll be able to get Trell on for some of these shows, although he has a pretty limited amount of time to practice for the MDI as it is. So when he does have that time available, we really don't want to take it away from him by having him spend a couple hours on the show. So he's busy doing that.
And in the note of that, also we're not going to be able to really do them live for the next 6 weeks just because of availability. Plus, we really don't want to overlap with MDI stuff on weekends and whatnot. So
yeah,
so please forgive us. We will be getting back to having them live, but in the meantime, they're going to be pre-recorded.
Yep. So we'll be on YouTube. We'll be on iTunes, Spotify, which obviously because if you're listening to this and watching this, you figured that out. But we won't be on Twitch for those next 6 weeks until the MDI concludes for this time around. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about this week. This week we're doing an episode that I've been arguing to do this episode for 10 weeks now. I've been trying to sneak this topic in. We'll see how it goes. Okay.
So for those of you who don't know, Dratnos and I have been initially. The concept of this even started because I wanted to partner up with him just to do dungeon by dungeon guides. Mm-hmm. And so at some point we decided that we were going to start a podcast together, and we got Trell on board and everything else. But initially we wanted to do dungeon by dungeon guides. So now finally jumping back into that is what we're doing this week. We got Atal'Dazar.
Yeah. So. But we'll do this guide also in the context of current events, which is the MDI. Part of the reason we picked Atal'Dazar is because they actually had a poll for what the affixes were going to be in Atal'Dazar. They ended up selecting Sanguine, Explosive, Tyrannical on that poll. I mean, there's always going to be Tyrannical, but Sanguine and Explosive beat out a bunch of other affix combos, which we'll talk about the emissaries as they are in the MDI. Although there are, of course, 3 different possible variations of emissaries, and some of them are pretty annoying in Atal'Dazar. We can briefly mention where those make things really suck. Void Week in particular, there's some toxic ones, but during the MDI, oh my god, yeah. During the MDI, we have just the Arcane variant, so the Arcane Week. We'll be looking at that. But before we get to Atal'Dazar, let's talk a little bit about the MDI bracket, because it's now been finalized. We have our top 8 gamers making it to the first cup here. In first place, we actually have the first time I think that we've seen them in first seed, Abracadabra, a whole 13 seconds ahead of Method NA on these time trials. Are you surprised by this development here?
I think Abracadabra just ended up obliterating Waycrest Manor with their Mistweaver Monk play. So it was kind of surprising that they, because Method NA actually did end up winning Siege of Borealis and Freehold, but just Abracadabra's Waycrest Manor was just so astonishingly quick.
2 minutes faster than Method NA's, yeah. Which 2 minutes in MDI is, that's years. That's as long as it gets.
I think the most notable thing is the Method EU slump, which watching now and talking to him a little bit, he kind of attributed it to them just not having enough practice time and preparation time going into it. But overall, I'm just glad that everybody's streaming all their stuff, man. I was just so tired of them being super secretive about time trial stuff.
The team streaming time trials has been awesome. They're not streaming practice for the most part now, going up to the cup, which makes a lot more sense, because at this point, now that there's actually a bracket, you know who you're up against, so there's a lot more direct value in watching your opponent's streams. But streaming time trials at least is a lot better than it was before. Okay, so that's Abracadabra in first, Method NA in second, very close second, Method EU a whole 4 minutes behind in third. Then we got Paint for Fem, which is Fem tanking that team.
Yeah, they got Shelly and all those guys. So they seemed like they were like super consistent out of even the top four. They seemed like they were one of the more consistent teams than them and Method in A. Seemed like I would say they're the most consistent out of the top four.
Yeah,
but they do also seem like they're just kind of like an echelon below the top three, I must admit.
These are gamers that play together on live a lot. They play together in Keystone Masters, that community run tournament. Which Syrah, the host of that, big congratulations to him, will be casting alongside you this weekend in the MDI. Really happy to see him making his way up onto that stage, especially after all the work he put into Keystone Masters. In 5th seed, we have 40K, another returning team from last season of the MDI.
Yeah, I expect to see them and Paint for Femme kind of battling back and forth for who ends up getting 4th. I don't think the 4th spot is really on lock as much as we would like to see. So we're going to end up seeing between Paint for Femme and 40K probably who ends up nailing down 4th place.
Then in 6th place, we have team No Girls Allowed. That's Trell's team. Trell, Edel, Sistara, Undad, and Dilemma. Of course, we're contractually obligated to be rooting for that team. So
let's go.
Yeah, let's do it, Trell. Let's take it home.
Make NA proud. Yeah, exactly. I think they unfortunately got the lucky get to play against Method EU strong.
Yeah, sixth seed. You do not want to get your 6th seed and see Method EU as your first opponent. That's really brutal.
Yeah, I was joking with Trail. I was like, "Congratulations, you got 6th seed." He goes, "Yes, I'm allowed to play versus Method EU." I was like, "Oh no." I mean, on the upside though, Method EU looks like they've had a lot of inconsistencies, but I think it's like safe to expect that they end up shoring up all of those coming into the cup.
Yeah, I think Method EU, like, they're pretty far behind here in the cup or in the time trials performance, but I would expect them to be competitive, if not, dominant still in the actual live event.
I think that's fair.
And I think that there's an argument for do they really want to spend this much, spend an extra huge amount of time getting these last 5 minutes to get them a couple seeds in time trial play? There's not a huge benefit for that.
They completely squashed their. Was it their freehold? Yeah, they completely squashed their freehold, I think. It was such a bad run. It ended up being so long.
Yeah, 15:53 compared to other teams' 13-minute runs.
Yeah, exactly. So that just put them in a pretty big detriment. Plus the fact that I don't think their Wickrus mana was anything to be super impressed by, and then their Siege of Borealis strategy, it was pretty good. It was pretty good, but again, I think that they said that they would have preferred to have played Horde, but they'd already practiced too much of Alliance side Borealis to go back at that point. So I think it was just a pretty bad storm.
I think the Horde Siege is definitely becoming the meta. After Method and Nave ran it in the champs last time.
I think, yeah, but man, being able to meld off Void Emissaries is also pretty nice, I must say.
Yeah, that's definitely nice, but the Alliance pathing is just so much more toxic in that place.
Well, yeah, the opener for Alliance is really bad. Plus, the fact that you have Sanguine makes the first boss way harder for Alliance teams, from what I understand.
Because the ads keep spawning as well, right? And that boss for Alliance, whereas they don't for Horde, too.
Really? That's
I believe that the boss is coded slightly differently, and it's harder for Alliance. I might be making that up, but I think I saw a tweet about that from one of these MDI players.
That's interesting.
All right, so those are the top 6 teams. All of them are playing pretty much the same composition. Prot Warrior, except Trell, is sometimes playing Brewmaster. Resto Druid, everybody pretty much exclusively, although we did see a Mistweaver in a Waycrest. Yeah. And then we're seeing at least double Outlaw Rogue, if not triple, with sometimes a Windwalker and sometimes an Unholy Death Knight, depending on the dungeon.
Yep, some exceptional Windwalker play occasionally.
And Windwalker does some really, really cool things. I mean, Ring of Peace is a uniquely powerful way to deal with Tide's emissaries if you don't want to just chain root them. You can just, ring them out and then kick whatever you need to kick.
Dude, sometimes you can literally ring the Tide's emissary out of the pack and it doesn't get in combat with you. Like, what?
Yeah,
what is that?
It's not hard-coded to be part of the pack. They just plonked it right in the middle of the pack, and they assumed that it would just always proxy pull, because mobs always pull when there's something in combat right next to them.
But Ring of Peace is a little bit different.
Throws a wrench in that, yeah. So that's pretty cool when that works out, or when that happens. Okay, then in 7th place, we have Team Off Meta. This team is actually an off meta team. We have Ellesmere in this team playing Holy Paladin, which is really cool to see. And it does mean that they don't have access to a battle res, and it also means that they don't have access to Shadow Meld. But Ellesmere's Holy Paladin damage is absurd, and we'll have to see. Obviously, I'm going to be rooting for them. We'll see them up against Method NA to start with, but it's really cool to see.
So we're probably going to see them versus Team No Girls Allowed.
Yeah, so it's okay. It's smart. The smart money is on them and No Girls Allowed meeting up in the losers bracket pretty quick. Yeah, but upsets always could happen. Method NA or Method EU could always get dethroned. But yeah, that's the likely way that this will play out.
Yeah. Also important, Off Meta actually renamed to Team Fly Me Out as some play off of their last team. Somebody brought over an e-girl, and now they're memeing because they dissolved their last team because of said e-girl. So now they're named the Team Fly Me Out. So without getting into too many specifics on it,
I have no knowledge of any of that situation or anything, but.
Very funny name, if you do know.
I like Team Off Meta. That's because they're highlighting the fact that they're off the meta. In Team 8th place, we have another Sizigi. This team, a whole 21 minutes behind the first seed in time trial play here, is the coolest team comp we have in the list. Let's click through here. We've got a BM Hunter and a Vengeance Demon Hunter on this team. Making their way into this top 8. So that is going to be extremely exciting to watch, the Vengeance Demon Hunter.
Yeah, I don't really know what to think about that. It's definitely going to be very interesting to see, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're huge underdogs. Their times were way slower than everybody. They're playing this weird comp. They'll be up against Abracadabra, who's been looking on fire recently to start with. But, anything could happen. Vengeance Demon Hunter maybe can do some really cool things in some of these polls. I mean, the Vengeance Demon Hunter kit is full of extremely powerful abilities. The problem is just that they're pretty squishy generally. But maybe there's some things that they've figured out with the essences that people haven't really looked into yet. I don't know. Maybe something cool will happen.
Yeah, that's a pretty slow Waycrest manner, I must admit.
The Waycrest time isn't very good. The Freehold time, okay, all of their times are 5 or more minutes slower.
Freehold is acceptable.
Freehold is 4 minutes slower, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 7. Oh man, so 1850 was the best Borealis time.
So they've got some time to make up, but they're not going to be only playing. They're not going to only be playing these time trial dungeons. Maybe this team had less time to prepare for the runs as well. So
that's a good point. I hope they own.
In a time where there's 9 dungeons instead of 3, maybe they're going to be better positioned because they'll, presumably Abracadabra isn't going to practice too hard the maps that they're up against this team on. They'll probably practice the ones that are on the later matches. So this team might be able to, focus entirely on those ones. I don't know. I mean, obviously they're underdogs. But I will root for them nonetheless because
anything can happen. If you're having a bad day, basically MDI is kind of determined by who ends up wiping the most. So, I mean, if Abracadabra or whoever they end up playing in the second round has a bad day, then they could snake some wins probably.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's way better than this. The time trial showing even has them pinned out to be. So who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, the smart money is that they'll be eliminated very quickly, right? But there's always hope. So I'm hopeful.
Yep.
Okay, so that is the MDI. That's the bracket that we'll be looking at. That's who we'll be rooting for. Of course, Trell's team, the big one. After Trell's team, I'm rooting for Method NA. I don't know about you, so yeah, I'm Trell's team, Method NA, and then obviously the off meta teams. Would be fun to see do well, but that's my predictions. You as a caster, I don't know if you have to stay neutral or whatever.
I don't have to stay neutral or anything. I just normally do. Okay. Just as a rule.
Fair enough.
Principle. I don't know. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of people on a bunch of these different teams, so I don't really have one that's oh yes, this is way better than the other. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that's what we have to look forward to this weekend. Saturday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. I don't even know what that is, 5 p.m. European or something. That's when it'll be. It'll be airing on twitch.tv/Warcraft. You'll catch Tettles casting, along with Zyronic, Sloot, Nagura, Jack, and Syrah. So, dream team, a real dream team of casters. Tettles, you're the only one not in the Future Guild as well, right? Out of those 5, or not?
Zyro's in Limit.
Zyro
right?
was in Future though, and so was Nagura, right? But she's now in. She's not in Future anymore, I don't think, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I was the only one who's never been
in Future. Yeah, so you should get on that, right? It would. They need to complete all 6 Infinity casters, right?
No, I'm not joining Future. I'm not making a European character, man.
Okay. Let's move on to our main topic this week, which is Atal'Dazar. Atal'Dazar, we'll talk about the MDI pathing in particular and MDI pulls, but there will be useful information here really for anybody who ever wants to do this dungeon. So I think kind of the most famous part of Atal'Dazar is snapping, right, Tettles? That's every time you cast this thing in the MDI, you have to explain what snapping is, and because every team is going to do it 20 times in the dungeon.
Yeah, so basically Atal'Dazar and Waycrest Manor are probably the 2 most notable dungeons for having like these weird snap spots where some mobs will just like instantly teleport to you once they no longer have no path available. Some mobs will end up either doing one of 2 things. Most of the time they'll either jump to you, or actually 3 things. They'll either jump to you, they'll teleport you to them, or they'll just like stand there and evade out, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Atal'Dazar, all the mobs snap to you, especially whenever you're on these line of sight points for the most part. And the most notable ones are these like on the backside of these like braziers. Like Dratnos is like using his mouse, I'm sure, to like highlight over.
Yeah, here, let me draw it. So like there's here.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're listening to this audio only, basically they're like towards the middle of the dungeon on the bridges above Razan's room. There's these little things off to the side that tanks can jump to. And these are very popular snap spots. There's also some that you can reach by jumping from stairs at certain points.
Basically, anything with no path available in this dungeon will instantly snap all the mobs to you, is the root of it.
Yeah.
And basically, it becomes very time efficient for you to use rogues with tricks of the trade on the tank, and then the rogues walk up, they hit the mobs instantly teleport on top of the tank that is in this spot, and then you just like Mongo cleave it down with Essence of the Focusing Iris or just a bunch of damage or whatever else. Also important to note with Atal'Dazar, for some reason, emissaries do not snap.
Yep.
So very good for Tides weeks. So if you're looking to separate out a pack, you can actually just like snap the whole entire pack away from the emissary of the Tides, and then just like spam root it, and then come back and kill it in a little bit.
Yeah, it's even better for the enchanted emissaries. They'll just stand there losing energy and then disappear. And you've not done anything. Cool. A very good answer to void emissaries as well. You just do it out of range of them, and then you eventually meld off the void emissary later, and you don't have to worry about it at all. So snapping, an extremely powerful tool all throughout Atal'Dazar. But usually the first pull of the dungeon doesn't involve snapping, right? The first pull of the dungeon is often you just go right down to the left and you deal with these trolls over on the left-hand side. Not everybody does this. Atal'Dazar, very non-linear dungeon. You could do the dungeon in a bunch of different ways. But a pretty standard MDI opener pull is something like these 6 enemies here. And then depending on affixes, you may add these 3 back here. It's also possible to grab this Sky Screamer down here if you have a ranged player, tag them. But that's not something that a lot of teams do these days.
Yeah, okay. And also, if you can like mark those stairs too, basically if you're standing on top of the stairs, the Juggernaut always targets any players at range. So you probably want most of your people in melee, and then if you have any ranged players, they should jump up top on those stairs right there. And basically the Juggernaut cannot charge them, so they will be standing in melee the whole entire time, making for a very efficient cleave just in general. So yeah. And
the Juggernaut has more health than the other mobs in this pack. That's another thing that's worth noting for bolstering weeks or sanguine weeks or whatever. When you're trying to even cleave stuff, you generally want to be doing more damage to the Juggernaut. And yeah, it will always charge. If there is at least one person at range of it, it will charge one of those people at range. Otherwise, it will charge right into melee, so that's a problem. But if that person who's at range is on one of these purple spots here, they will have no path to run to them, so they'll just cast their charge and not actually do anything. And that's a really powerful strategy that we see develop. Usually we'll see the Resto Druid just stealth up to this stair spot here before the pull starts.
If you're up there as a ranged DPS, though, be very careful, especially on skittish weeks, because if you actually pull threat on any mobs, they'll instantly snap teleport to you, because that is a no path available spot. And Atal'Dazar, like we were just talking about, is a snap like only dungeon. So if you accidentally pull threat on anything, it'll snap it up to you. God forbid you accidentally snap that auger or the confessor up there with you, you're probably gonna wipe.
Dude, I wonder if there's a strat that involves actually like fighting the mobs on that snap spot. Like, you snap the mobs there, and then everybody else can hang out downstairs and not get charged.
So realistically, you could probably like shroud your tank through and then snap all the mobs up there, and then just like, and then the juggernauts don't charge off the ledge.
Yeah, I wonder if that's something that teams could try.
I've never thought of this before. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is a pretty big brain strategy.
Well, do you know that I believe that I'm actually the person who invented this technology for the juggernauts? I didn't invent this stair spot, but the other spot, the other spot up here, the second green spot that I've marked.
The one that people pull back to. Oh, is that whenever you guys were going for Realm First 15?
That was before Realm, or after Realm First 15, just in Season 1 when we were pushing Atal'Dazar. We were having problems with Juggernaut charges, so I was just like jumping around, and I figured out you could jump up here, and we tested. It's possible that that other people came up with this independently, but I showed this to Jason. Jason showed it to Shakib, and then from there it went to all
everybody.
Around. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, that will be TBD on snapping all of the mobs on top of that stair spot. But in the meantime, make sure that you don't pull threat.
So yeah, these pulls, the honor guards they have a behavior that people should be aware of if you're kiting in here, which is they're going to just fervent strike the tank, which is just a targeted strike that does a lot of damage to the tank. But if the tank is kiting, they will fervent strike anybody who gets next to them, and that'll murder DPS. So you need to be ready if you're a rogue to like parry that or dodge it, or if you don't have an ability to survive that, you can't get next to an honor guard while it's being kited, or else you'll die to a fervent strike. So watch out for that. That does claim lives from time to time. And then, the auger, you just kick all its spells as much as you can. The confessor is an interesting one. The confessor has 2 different spells, and they actually behave a little differently. So Mending Word is a heal that it'll cast on the lowest health thing in the pack. It will cast this on emissaries, which can be pretty toxic. On Emissary of the Tide. So.
Oh no, man.
But Mending Word, if you stun or gouge or whatever the confessor while it's casting Mending Word, it will not recast. It'll just keep on going about its life. So that is an effective interrupt against it. The other spell this thing casts, Mantle of Bwansamdi, behaves differently. If you stun or gouge Mantle of Bwansamdi, it will recast as soon as it can. So you need to use a real kick on Mantle of Bwansamdi, but you can have one outlaw rogue assigned to just gouge the Mending Word and kick the Mantle of Bwansamdi, and then everybody else can be on the auger. And that's usually how you can how you'll do this in MDI, because that frees up more kicks so that you can pull more mobs all at once.
Yeah, because Outlaw Rogue is very sick, and they have Gouge and Between the Eyes. So I'm just like,
and Blind and Vanish Cheap Shot. There's actually just 70 different ways that Outlaw Rogue can stop Mending Word. And yet sometimes when I'm assigned to do it, I panic and don't actually stop it. So
yeah, because you just save your kick for the dome, right?
Yeah, you always kick Mantle of Bwansamdi, and you use a different ability to stop Mending Word, and then you've got it completely handled. So that's the first pull of Atal'Dazar. Often one that teams like to lust here. I think it's just a good lust to grab all this stuff in lust, and it gets you lust on cooldown.
Yeah, so it kind of depends. So I think that's like probably the safest lust, like by far. I think the only alternative is if you are on a pretty big tyrannical week, you may elect to go RowsOn on the opener and bloodlust him, especially because RowsOn has just 10 jillion health and is a pretty efficient bloodlust in itself too.
Yep, lusting RowsOn I think is the big alternative first bloodlust.
Yeah, unless for some reason I don't know, like maybe there's something where you go to like straight to Priestess Alunza, but that seems like
I've seen that was a method you used strat last time where you'd like
beeline to Alunza.
You'd run up there and meld at the top of these stairs, and you'd skip you'd still skip the Colossus pulls. Speaking of which, Colossus pulls over on the left hand side of this dungeon. They're not that bad anymore. We saw them in the last MDI when they were worse than they are currently as well.
40K, notably one of the teams that ends up pulling those Colossus pretty regularly. I know that we were pretty critical of that last MDI, but now that pack with the Colossus nerfs,
yep,
it's not that bad.
Colossi, pretty good ratio of count to health. That like they give more count, but it's equal. They have more health in the same amount. They just do like a nuke on one target that's uninterruptible. And whenever anything nearby dies, they get a 10% damage done increase. So
yeah, you used to heal them for 25% of the health, which is why you never saw it pulled.
It used to require that the Colossi died first, so it used to not be something you could do. Realistically, was pull these things. Although back in season 1, we pulled these when we went realm first 15. We just focused them down. We had priority
Everybody pulled
damage.
them.
Yeah. But since then, the meta has kind of evolved. I would expect that most groups will still probably not be pulling Colossi. But you never know. The emissaries on active in MDI are these ones, the Enchanted Week right now, that is selected on this MDT. So if you actually look, there are not that many bad emissaries here. You can skip this side and you can just deal with this Enchanted Colossus pull.
That Tides emissary makes that pack pretty much like not doable, but that Enchanted one, if you really want it, you can get in there, I guess.
Yeah, or again, you could just meld past this. One benefit of anytime you
Alliance, yes.
Anytime you meld past an Enchanted Emissary as well, it'll take a lot of energy loss as well, and you could potentially pull that pack later if you wanted to, and the Enchanted Emissary won't be as much of a problem.
Yeah. But they don't give count, so
yeah, that's true. That's true. That they're less worthwhile.
Dude, I'm so glad that they don't give count. It would be mega troll if you would just like tag them and then like meld them off.
That would be the strategy. If Enchanted Emissaries gave count, you would like run around and grab them at the end of the dungeon or whatever, and just wait out the clock for them to despawn.
They just literally run around, run around like manically. That'd be interesting.
Okay, yeah. So that's the left. We'll not talk too much about these Colossi pulls, with the exception that you might see those pulled. Let's go talk about Rozan. And one alternative thing that some teams do is they'll actually just run straight to Rozan as the very first thing that they do in the dungeon. And that is absolutely viable as well. That's kind of a good just thing to do on tyrannical weeks in live keys if you want. Just
because you have all of your cooldowns.
Yeah,
it depends on where you have your cooldowns available. Like if you're going to get multiple rounds of cooldowns on Rozan, you're probably better off like running just like straight at him. On the opener, like on heavy tyrannical weeks, I think is like the most notable for this, especially whenever you're doing higher keys.
Yeah.
Whereas you have to blow like all of your cooldowns on this trash on the left-hand side to make sure that it actually ends up going smoothly. So it really just kind of depends on allocation. Plus the packs on the left on non-fortified weeks are not that bad.
This is the only emissary combination where there's not a Tides in this set of 6 mobs over on the left that we talked about. On Void Week, there's a Tides here. In the first of those, and in Tides Week, there's a Tides in the second one. So on 2 of the 3 emissary combinations, this left pull is a lot harder because there will be a Tides emissary in there. And you may be interested in just not bothering with pulling all that up together and just running and lusting Rozan to start with anyways.
But so a lot of times last season we actually saw Rozan done like way later in the dungeon just because of how it ends up lining up with Reaping or how efficient it would be to pull Reaping with Rozan. But with the changes of the removal of Reaping and adding up Beguiling, now you actually see Rozan done like second pull of the instance. I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, you can do it. Like you can find good times to jump down to Rozan still. Particularly if there's... But the problem is, like, jumping down to Rozan would just facilitate skipping a bunch of pretty easy pulls anyways that you can usually mass pull. We may see teams ending up coming up with a strategy that involves jumping down to Rozan. But
you do want to catch Rozan in a good pat, I think.
Yeah.
So you'd probably be looking to do some of like the middle packs of Sarids or that Sarid pack on the right-hand side or whatever, and wait for Rozan to get to a pretty good spot. Pretty much every group in the history of this game tanks Rozan on that right-hand side of his room just because of the line of sight.
Yeah.
Except for in the MDI, whenever you're actually pulling Skyscreamers into him. So
yeah, so the almost the gold standard is just tank Rozan here and here, right? The 2 north spots in this, and that's because the south ones are actually bugged and don't provide line of sight.
Except because in the MDI they never pursuit the boss because they just continue to shadow meld it off, so they actually just tank him at that like stairwell area
down to the south.
They don't actually. Yeah, so they never actually walk the boss away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an MDI only thing, so don't be thinking that's a common strategy.
I've done this on live as well. It was a completely scuffed pull. It was a huge disaster. We only went down there because people were on the wrong side or whatever. And but yeah, you can use the stairs to line of sight the fear, or you can just use the pillars that are the standard live strategy is these 2 green circles here in the north part of Rozan's room. Now Rozan, you have to line the fear. The pursuit is an interesting mechanic. On MDI, you really don't care about who it targets because you just shadow meld it, or vanish it if it's a rogue, whatever. On live, you may actually want to game who gets targeted by Pursuit. Pursuit works the following way. As long as there are at least 2 people at range of Rozan, it's guaranteed that one of those people will be targeted for Pursuit. However, if only 1 or 0 people are out at range and everybody else is in the hitbox, it might target one of the people in the hitbox instead.
Yes.
So you need to have at least 2 people out baiting it. to guarantee that it will go on one of them. If you only have one person outbaiting it, it might target anybody.
So any rogues with Vanish, hunters with Feigned Death, anybody with Shadow Meld should be looking to stand at range. Pretty much 100% of your time. The healer should also be looking to stand at range. And then beyond that, you should kind of gauge whether or not it's more beneficial for your range DPS if you have any, or your tank to be walking at range. For triple melee comps, it's just going to be your tank and your healer. Whenever that's going to be like your default bread and butter. I don't have any Vanishes or Shadow Melds available, so it'll be the tank and the healer. And then it's also important to note that Pursuit is kind of buggy in the sense of it like ends up lasting 2 seconds longer than like the Pursuit taunt duration. So basically, once the Pursuit debuff falls, if it is actually targeting your tank, RowsOn will literally speed up to his maximum run speed because he normally is.
His Pursuit is slower than his run speed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever he actually, whenever the Pursuit actually ends up fading, he speeds up to his normal run speed, but he can still eat the tank for 2 more seconds. So somebody with the taunt should taunt the boss off of the tank, and then the tank has to re-taunt the boss back onto him. Otherwise, he's going to get eaten, and it's really troll and probably should get fixed, but that's the way it ends up working out. So most of the time, you end up having your healer or one of your melee, if they do end up having a taunt available to them, they'll just end up taunting him. Your tank will taunt it back if your tank is fixated with the Pursuit. That's only if your tank is fixated with the Pursuit, though.
Yeah, and this is again not something you'll see on MDI, because on MDI there won't be any tanks fixated by Pursuit. It'll just always be somebody out at range who melts it or vanishes. So
yep,
not to worry in that context. Now, outside of this, one other thing to note in RowsOn's room, there are a bunch of piles that spawn raptors. I would be amazed if you, like, raptor spawning is so good for outlaw single target now. It's even better than it was last MDI when they would usually spawn 1 or 2. Now just spawning 1 raptor is a huge single target increase for all your outlaw rogues. So I would expect there will almost always be 1 raptor with the boss, helping the outlaw rogues do more single target.
Did they nerf RowsOn's serrated teeth bleed?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, I don't think they. I meant, did they buff it? I think they might have buffed it. I think they might have like stealth hotfix buffed it at some point.
Okay, yeah, I've been dying to it on live on my tank, so yeah, maybe.
I think they might have actually ended up buffing it. That serrated teeth bleed, the dot that the RowsOn actually ends up putting on your tank can actually be pretty hefty, especially whenever you're doing this on live. So you actually need to be, if you're healing, you need to kind of babysit your tank a little bit, just in general. Like even if they buffed it or not, that dot still hits like a truck. And if you're pulling a bunch of raptors for wit stacks, plus you have like the tank bleed, plus you're dropping every single Pursuit, your tank may actually end up going down because he doesn't end up having just enough mitigation to be able to kind of roll through it.
On MDI, I bet they'll get away with it because it's a 17 and they're in full mythic gear.
Yes, and they're like the most optimized gear imaginable and everything else. Yeah,
and they'll have cooldowns spaced out for it. Again, you only need to pull the raptor on if there's no other, if you're not fighting the skyscrapers at the same time. But you only need 1 raptor as well for the full benefit of wits now. It's not like before where the more the merrier. So yeah, you're right though. The serrated teeth bleed is really painful, and it's also, it comes with a physical damage taken increase as well. So that's that's a huge component of why it's so lethal as well.
Yeah, boss is like. Dangerous only to your tank, basically. And it's just like sometimes your tank ends up going down because of like if the Resto Druid isn't pre-hotting the serrated teeth bleed, if they're just kind of chilling in cat form the whole entire time, then your tank is probably going to die. So you actually kind of need to be aware of what's going on.
All right, so MDI, usually you're going to see teams then come up the south side where the Skyscreamers and the Tides were, and because the problem is the north side has a Void Emissary, and we don't do those in MDI. Void Emissaries that's a no-go generally. So yeah, they'll come back up the south side, and then probably start making their way to Volkoff. Now, Volkoff, there's going to be a lot of trash skipped along the way to Volkoff, but usually teams will do some of the trash at the start here. Usually we're looking at 3 total Shadowblade Stalkers, 1 Reanimated Honor Guard, and 2 Shield Bearers of Zul, at least, being pulled by most teams here. Depending on the affixes, there's a couple different ways that you can do these pulls, right? I mean, I think it just kind of comes down to what emissary actually ends up being over there. That emissary, the Void, that's like sitting right there, is actually pretty troll. So you'll end up just like CCing the honor guard. Like
maybe you end up using a Ring of Peace and then like paralysing the Honor Guard or whatever else. Making sure that you don't. Okay, so that Void Emissary is actually so close to the totem. It's actually so troll because it just gets the totem just kind of gets cleaved down. So you need to make sure that you're probably not face tanking that Honor Guard. Otherwise, your tank is probably going to die. That pack is actually kind of obnoxious whenever there is a Void Emissary there. But you need to make sure that you just you can actually line of sight it using the stairs.
Yeah.
So you should probably like dip down.
It's not too bad of a Void Emissary in terms. There's some pretty easy line of sight for this Void Emissary.
Yeah, exactly. But most of the time, people just kind of like run in on it, and then they blow up the totem that activates the Honor Guard's AOE, and basically you can't tank the Honor Guard AOE while the Void Emissary is exploding. It's like just not possible damage wise. So you need to be tanking one or the other at a time, and so you need to make sure that you're not killing the totem. Maybe you CC the Honor Guard off to the side, like Ring of Peace in the way, and then you just only tank that Stalker there. The Stalker that's in stealth, of course. You can just tank it like right on top of the Void Emissary for efficient killing.
That's one option for sure. We'll have to see exactly what teams come up with for this route. This is something where I'm completely unclear on what exactly teams will do during MDI.
I bet they skip all of it.
Yeah, that's an option, right? You can just skip all this stuff. Like just
is that middle pack pullable?
Yeah,
I think that middle pack. No, not like the middle pack of the room. I meant that middle pack like leading to Volkoff, like
this thing,
one with the that one. Do you think that's pullable? I think you might just end up pulling that for count.
Yeah, the problem is it's kind of hard to to sneak to here. These shield bearers have true sight, so you're gonna have to meld far away from them.
I mean, the only thing you actually need to meld... No, you're actually going to pull those with...
Okay, you pull these into this, is what you're saying? You
should
pull
only
two
thing
shield bearers.
Is that Void Emissary. Yeah.
Yeah, so you just kind of run here and meld, and then you fight all this stuff probably at once. So this is...
The only thing you're melding... That's an MDI pull. That's not like a live thing.
Yeah, of course.
It's like only an MDI pull.
On live, the standard is you'd pull like these and then you'd skip from there afterwards into Volkoff's room.
Exactly.
And again, for people on audio, I need to do a better job of making sure. But basically, on live, you'd usually just pull 2 Stalkers, a reanimated Honor Guard, another Stalker, and 2 Shield Bearers, and then you'd skip from there to Volkoff. But at MDI, we're thinking about maybe a strategy that involves doing a pull halfway along the way to Volkoff's room. The problem with this pull that I'm seeing is like, okay, it's going to take less than 2 minutes, and now your Shadow Meld is on cooldown, and you want to meld into Volkoff's room.
You can shroud into Volkoff's room though.
Oh yeah, you can shroud from here to Volkoff's room. All right.
Yeah, that's why it's an MDI only thing, because you're gonna have 2 shrouds and you're gonna have your whole entire team having Shadow Meld. So that's like only an MDI.
Yeah, we'll see if this pull ends up being what they do. I
have no idea.
I have no idea how they'll attack this, but I think you have a good theory, Tettles, absolutely, about what they might do.
I mean, it's just because that Void Emissary right there is just like really obnoxious to deal with, and you really want to have to like.
And this is good count. This pull here is good. This is good. This is good. A good amount of count and a doable pull. So yeah.
So basically, like on live, you just would slow roll it. Like I said, the pack that's to the right of the stairs that you would generally have is going to have a Void Emissary on Tides weeks only, or on Enchanted weeks only. Yeah. So yeah, I actually think it has it on Tide. Does it have it on Tides weeks too? Can you check?
Tides week, it's in a different spot. It's in this spot. It's nearby on Tides weeks, and then on Void weeks, their voids are further up and are much more obnoxious. On Void weeks, the voids leading up to Volkoff are really obnoxious. You have this one leading into Volkoff's room. It is so brutal. I don't know if anybody's figured out how to do this thing yet. Usually we just skip in.
That's the only thing that actually needs to be talked about in terms of like Void week for Atal'Dazar just in general, though, is that specific pull. So I think we can move on.
Yeah.
So basically what Dratnos is talking about is before the gates of Volkoff on Void week only. Okay, so it's a double Honor Guard pack.
Yep.
So it's not doable. It's absolutely not doable. And then they throw a Void Emissary in the gateway. And basically there's multiple ways of getting around that Void Emissary if you really want to. So basically you can walk far left. They added an invisible wall, but they added it poorly. So basically, like often green grass pastures to the left of Volkoff's gate, you can like jump up on the rock and like jump across into the water and actually make it into his room. In addition to that, there's also a different strategy with how if you have multiple rogues, which if you're not running a double rogue comp in 2019, I would kind of surprised, to be honest. They've been OP for a while. You can actually have one of your rogues shroud you into the room while the other rogue takes the whole entire pack to the left side, and vanishes it off, and you will be in like fake combat with that Void Emissary for some reason. So you can actually still like vanish skip all the way through it, but you can't just normal Shadow Meld skip it through it, or you can't just normal Shroud skip it through it. So that Void Emissary makes Atal'Dazar for pretty much every single group that doesn't know these like weirdly niche strategies just completely closed. Like the dungeon is just like completely dead in the water.
Yeah, it's like Void Emissaries are weird. They've been changed. It used to be a little bit easier to do because you could distract him, but you can't anymore. So yeah, you just have to do this whole like fake combat thing for them. Yeah, I don't know what to like say about it except for I don't think it's fair. I think they should.
Void Week Atal'Dazar is closed. That pack is so. Honor Guard's AoE is entirely too much. That pack needs to be nerfed. Honestly, they should just like remove both Honor Guards from that pack. Maybe remove one of them or something. But like that pack is just like not doable as is. And I don't think I've ever actually seen anybody in the history of mankind to do that pack intentionally. So
I was trying to find a clip of showing the rock skip up at the side, but I couldn't find it. But yeah, there's you just go on the rocks up here, and then you go along here, and then you can come in that way. To skip in.
Yeah, I tried to describe it as best I could just for the audio only people. So you literally like walk left of Volkoff's gate, you walk up the rocks, and you jump into this invisible wall, but then you're like in the water. And then once you're in the water, you like walk across like this like left-hand side.
You're just like hugging an invisible wall, and then there's a break in the invisible wall, and you can get through to Volkoff's room. Yeah,
exactly. And then you can jump up onto the little ledge, onto the
actual platform,
area, and then you can and then you can jump into Volkoff's room. And it's like kind of random, but it does.
It's a good strategy on live to get through this, but not something you'll see anybody spend any time on in the MDI. Although it's not even Void Week in the MDI anyway. Atal'Dazar is always going to be Enchanted Week in the MDI.
Yeah, but that's just like really important for people who are doing Void Week.
Absolutely good thing to cover. Okay, so yeah, usually you'll skip into Volkoff's room one way or another. After very very rarely do we see these two pulls immediately before Volkoff's room ever pulled. Usually you're just going straight into Volkoff's room. Volkoff itself is a boss that has been buffed since season 2. This is a boss fight.
Yes.
That no longer just like instantly dies by itself. You just kill the 3 totems simultaneously. You interrupt its cast and you drag it around the room in a nice little circle. Other than that, there's just a lot of numbers that need to be done in terms of healing now. And outside of that, it's a straightforward boss fight.
Yeah, it can be pretty taxing on your healer, especially if you're like on a Grievous Tyrannical setting or something like that. Grievous or Tyrannical even.
Yeah.
Because the fight ends up lasting a pretty long time. In general, though, just making sure that you have a knowledgeable tank that is dropping the excrements that is coming out of Volkoff in a spot where you're actually just like triangulating the room, you'll end up being okay because it ends up despawning like right as you end up coming back around.
Yeah, as long as you're moving at the right pace, you will not run. Like if you move too fast, you'll run back into your old polluted areas. But if you move at the right pace, it'll just be despawning right in front of you. As you get to the second term, excrements.
Yeah, I don't really know what to call it. The green stuff that spawns off of him is like, whatever.
So yeah, then you kill Volkoff, and now it's time to skip back out. Which, again, in MDI, that's just use one of your 7 million shrouds to get back out. On live, you'll have to come up with another strategy. It used to be you could Warlock Gate, but they fixed it. But there used to be a Warlock Gate that went through out of combat from here to here, skipping this back.
Yeah, or you could like Heroic Leap or Vengeance Demon Hunter jump through.
Yeah.
And just a bunch of...
There were some cool skips, but those have been fixed through the terrain.
You could grapple through, or if somebody else was already through, you could wild charge through it.
Yeah,
with human form.
So there's
just a bunch of like random.
There are a couple different ways to get out of this room if you don't have that second shroud. If you have one rogue, you can blind an honor guard and sap a witch doctor, and then the rogue can walk up in stealth next to the honor guard and get in combat with it. And then everybody else can walk by hugging the wall, and they won't get in combat with it. And then the rogue can vanish on the other side. So that's one strategy.
I'm sure there's some Ring of Peace shenanigans too.
Yeah, you can just you sap an honor guard, or you sap a witch doctor and you distract Ring of Peace the honor guard away, and then you can hug the wall again and get through. That's another strategy that works. Yeah. So those are some of the different ways to get through here, and then you get to this trash pull on the stairs. Now this on MDI, it's going to have an enchanted emissary. joining the party here too. But there's usually it's 2 stalkers, two shield bearers, and 2 witch doctors. And this is a great pull to lust on fortified weeks on live. Is this stair pull? If you can get here, I'd recommend it.
So this is a 3 lust dungeon on live. So this is generally speaking just going to be your second lust of the dungeon, just based off time. Plus the fact that it's pretty efficient. The most dangerous mob in this pack by far are those witch doctors, because the cast that they end up doing just ends up like killing people. Like if you get 2 on the exact same person, they just like instantly die. Plus it's like mostly unhealable, because it'll end up doing like 60 or 70% of your health at a time. So you actually just like can't recover if you're getting hit by a bunch of them at once. Just from like a healer perspective, especially once you start getting to higher level stuff. So making sure that you're rotating kicks and CCs, and making sure that those shield bearers actually end up getting their dome interrupted, whether it be from like gouge, paralysis, any stuns. AoE stuns are normally pretty good there too.
Yeah.
So a lot of that stuff is pretty paramount to making that pull work. But most of the time you do end up seeing all 6 of those mobs pulled together. Plus you end up just having to CC the witch doctors, making sure they actually end up getting kicked, nuke them down, and you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, it depends a bit on the like. Sometimes what teams will do is they'll CC 1 witch doctor, pull the other 5, nuking the witch doctor, and then when that dies, they'll add the other witch doctor, and everything will die at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a thing. That is definitely a thing that you end up seeing a decent amount. But at the end of the day, that is not the most. It is like way slower, especially since you're blowing bloodlust on it. I think I would like to see you actually go for all 6, especially if you are electing to use bloodlust. But in general, you can get away with not. You can end up.
If you are having trouble with the witch doctors, that is an option. Is CC 1, nuke the other, and then add in the other. I don't recommend it either, but it is something that you can absolutely do.
Or you just play with a Moonkin and you just solar beam and you just kind of win.
Yeah, hit him with that solar beam, and they're dead in the solar beam, easy.
The only use of solar beam in this whole entire expansion is like owning those witch doctors. It's great.
All right, so after that pull on MDI, you can't lust this pull because MDI this is a 2 lust dungeon in MDI, and you're here before 10 minutes. MDI, usually your second lust has to be Yasma, but maybe it can be some trash right at the end of the dungeon if you have a route that lets you do that. But yeah, so now you're getting into the Sky Screamer Sword pulls. Depending on the affixes, these can be pretty toxic, pretty obnoxious. If it's bolstering week, usually you're going to want to sap Sky Screamers and then kill the swords. Otherwise, you can just priority damage Sky Screamers if you've got a comp for it. But that's
Sap or Demon Hunter in Prison is very important to these. Just because they also do keep you out of combat in case it is like a bolstering week or something else too. So that's always very nice. If you really want, you could, like you said, CC both like 2 sets of Sky Screamers and then just like snap like both packs of swords and then do the Sky Screamers by themselves, like rotating kicks through. It really just kind of depends. I know bolstering weeks that is a pretty good strategy as well. And it really just kind of ends up depending to what like affixes and what emissaries are in the packs and whatever else, right?
One thing we should note is that on MDI, the strategy is usually to snap these swords, but it is Sanguine week. And Sanguine was the affix that was voted for MDI for this place. Sanguine and snapping is sometimes a sketchy proposition, right? So teams will have to be careful here. Usually what you'll see them do is they'll still snap the swords and then they'll jump off and re-snap them back to the main platform, and then they'll be grouped, but you can still kite them. And kite them out of Sanguine pools. So that's the main gameplay pattern that I would expect to see in MDI in this place.
I hope we see somebody fall off the ledge. I think they'll laugh very hard.
Yep, that's a Yoda special.
And yes, the Yoda Shakib special, yeah.
And the really toxic thing about that now is that you can't even stealth back to your group super easily because there's now a void-touched emissary in the way that'll true sight you out if you fall off on this north side. So... we'll see if that goes.
Not optimal, I must admit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, you're just gonna be looking to snap all as many swords and as many Sky Screamers as you can into the spots, making sure that you just end up kicking the fear from the Sky Screamer. You're generally in good business. And then, like we were talking about earlier, emissaries don't snap, like we were stating. So whenever you're actually making your way through this like middle part of the instance, it's always really good that emissaries don't snap. Just like, all right, just snap the whole dungeon. You're going to be chilling. But you have to have tricks of the trade most of the time or a misdirection of some sort.
Yeah, it's really hard to snap as just a tank. You have to like get threat and then jump immediately onto your snapshot. Like you like.
I mean,
it's really not doable. Yeah,
is it worth it?
It's not realistic without tricks of the trade. No, tricks of the trade is the way to do this.
I think we're talking about these dungeons, like assuming that you at least have a rogue.
Yeah. And I've done these dungeons without a rogue. I've been doing keys on a tank without a rogue. So I've tried to come up with opportunities to snap these things, and it's not easy. So yeah,
it's pretty rough. I must admit.
If you have a rogue, you can snap. Otherwise, I would just not bother. I would just fight them where they are, because the drawbacks of snapping without a rogue outweigh the benefits. I would say.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about the middle pool?
Yeah, let's talk about the middle pool real quick, because the middle pool is something that we do see from time to time in the MDI. Usually you don't see this pull done live, although it is worth a lot of count. So maybe this is something that you'll see sometimes on live. The middle pool is worth, like, these enemies give a ton of count, the Dynamancer and the 2 dinosaurs. It does come with 4 swords as well. It is possible to pull them separately from the 4 swords. They're actually on 2 separate patrols. So there is a sword that is a patrol leader that can be sapped. It's the middle one. If you CC that, the other 3 big mobs will patrol independently, and the swords will stay on that sapped sword. And you can then just fight the 3 big mobs by themselves, or the 4 swords by themselves. This is a really useful trick. This is a useful trick for bolstering weeks in particular, if you do want to pull this pack on a bolstering week. So keep that in mind if that's something you're interested in. But normally on most other weeks, you'll just pull them all at once and kill the swords real quick.
Yeah, I think in general, the only time I really normally end up seeing this pack done is like teaming weeks, whenever count is pretty interesting. I know we're going to talk about teaming in a little bit, but that's most of the time the only time I ever really do end up seeing that pack done. However, it is important to note, if you actually do end up pulling this Dynamancer double, I don't even know what they are, Triceratops, whatever, dinosaur pull, you want to end up nuking down that orange dinosaur. That's the guy that charges out and does that stun.
Yep.
That guy's really obnoxious, so you should make sure that you're killing him off first.
You can snap this whole pack as well, and then Frenzied Charge won't go on the people who aren't being snapped, or who aren't on the snap spot.
I mean, I guess that's a thing. Yeah, I don't really. Is that really that great though? I don't really.
I'm pretty sure that's what Method EU does in this place. I'm not 100% sure though.
They did it once. I don't. Is that like the? I have no idea if that's actually the best strategy. I know for reaping it was pretty sick. Them snapping it onto it is pretty sick. I don't know. It's probably pretty good, especially if you're going to be like peppering in swords too, because the rogues can always just like run off while you're still cleaving down the
just add some more swords.
Dinosaurs. Just keep bringing swords in, just like trickle them in as your tricks comes up and everything else, because that pack does end up taking a pretty large amount of time to do. So if you're actually getting pretty efficient, value cleave there, it's probably worth. I don't know if we're going to end up seeing it this weekend on MDI, but it is like you said, the fact that you can snap it makes it a viable pull.
And then the other one that you'll want to be aware of is Monzumi's Wild Thrash. It's an 8-yard AoE around Monzumi. So you can actually, as like an outlaw rogue with extremely long arms, you can be outside of that and still meleeing Monzumi. So make sure you're max melee ranging if you're an outlaw, and you won't get hit by the Wild Thrash. Otherwise, you can just take a step back. It does quite a bit of damage, so it depends on what kind of your health situation is looking like, but just be aware that you can get out of melee of that thing and take less damage. The blue dinosaur.
So then moving on after that, we have the pack that's at the bottom of the stairs leading to Priestess Alunsa. The interesting part of this pack, the only actually interesting part of this pack, is the fact that the augur in the pack, once it's kicked the first time, if your tank is in melee range, it doesn't recast anything. So just make sure that if your tank is not if your tank is kite in this pack, then you're pretty effed, because the honor guard is going to start fervent striking people. But just make sure that you end up kicking that honor guard and making sure your tank's in melee range of him, because you won't end up recasting anything.
Yeah, so these are weird augurs. They behave differently than the other augurs in the dungeon. They'll cast once, and then if they're in melee range and they get kicked, they just stop casting. Now, there's a tides in this configuration, right? Bye, Tuttles. Later.
I'm still listening. Hold on, I'm turning on a light.
Okay. So there's a tides in the MDI configuration here, so we'll have to see how that plays out. With the augurs, they might be free casting. I don't know what it'll be. I guess you'll probably like taunt the tides out and start chain rooting it away from the pack. And then you can actually kick the augurs, and then you can bring it back in and cleave everything down. That's an option.
I think a lot of times people end up actually bringing a Skyscreamer into that pack too. Probably not with the tides, because it's not really that great. But
yeah, not if you. I mean, you can line. There's some line spots for Skyscreamer, but it's probably not worth it. You'll probably just find a way to do these 3 Skyscreamers together and then move into this pack.
I mean, you're gonna snap that pack out and just leave that tides there, and then carry the tides up the stairs.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that works.
That's what you're gonna do with that for an MDI thing. You're just gonna basically you're gonna Tricks of the Trade your tank. You're going to completely snap that whole entire pack. Your healer is going to spam Entangling Root on that Emissary of the Tides because every healer is a Resto Druid known to man. And then for MDI specifically, that's how you can do that. For live, of course, you can just kind of slow roll it. 30-minute timer is pretty generous in Atal'Dazar, so you can pretty much in general afford to take everything a little bit slower in Atal'Dazar.
All right, and then you make your way up to Alunza's room. Alunza is where you almost always do all the traps before Alunza at once because there's not really a way to split this into 2 reasonably sized poles. So it's 3 priestesses, 3 honor guards, a juggernaut, and an augur, along with an enchanted emissary on the MDI configuration. There's not too much to be said here. You just kind of deal with the mobs, and this is a good second lust if an MDI potentially. It's a good third lust sometimes in live, although it's actually really hard to get your third lust to line up for here and still be completing the dungeon in time. You have to have basically lusted on cooldown.
You're pushing it. Okay, so basically you can get this. You can get third lust here at 21 minutes if you're.
Yeah, it has to be basically exactly 21 minutes for you to still be timing the key.
Yeah, basically. Okay, so most of the time, if you're actually doing the key like a relatively good pace, you're going to be bloodlusting Yasma somewhere in the range of like 24 to 25 minutes. Yeah, you're gonna be bloodlusting Yasma 24 to 25 minutes. The only way that you can actually get your third bloodlust to line up here is like a 21 minute because you have like a 1 minute. You have like a bloodlust at like 30 seconds on your opener. You need to be like so slow to Volkoff that you end up having. You end up not wasting too much time getting back to Volkoff. Plus, you end up having Bloodlust available for that pull that's like at the bottom of the stairs. It's really tight. Is basically what Dratnos and myself are saying. So probably not going to have Bloodlust available here, but you may.
Yeah, and if you do have Bloodlust for this pull, you can lust it. But generally, it's just so hard to line it up exactly for here that it's not something that like realistically you're usually just going to lust Yasma on both fortified and tyrannical weeks.
Yeah. There's an augur in this pack that your rogue normally ends up taking care of, and I don't actually end up paying attention. I just kind of solar beam over top everything, and your rogue just ends up taking care of the augur. Make sure that you actually DPS down that mob first. There are some spots that you can actually evade out the juggernaut if you would like.
Yeah,
Dratnos is probably going to be.
There's the top of the stairs spot. Yeah.
For our audio only listeners, basically, like at the back side, at the top of the stairs, you can actually stand as a healer, and your tank has to like tank the pack like close enough to the stairs so that you actually have range on everything. But then the juggernaut will like fixate you for a charge, and you actually can't be charged. There's also these braziers off to the side as well, next to the 2-pack. You can actually stand on top of those as well and bait the juggernaut charges, but this will require you to have already previously pulled the 2-pack.
Or pull the 2-pack with this, which is doable. But now you're looking at 2 augurs, 2 juggernauts.
Yeah, I mean, sure. If you got large Konas,
you assign 1 rogue to each of the augurs, and they're hard. They're using all their stuff to keep it locked down as much as possible.
I mean, if you have bullets for that, then it's doable.
Yeah. And fighting this thing on the brazier there is going to make it easier. So.
Of course, make it way easier because it'll keep the juggernauts in melee range of the range of the whole entire pack, so everything can get cleaved down.
One thing to watch out for on weeks like Sanguine and Bolstering, Sanguine being an active affix in the MDI, is you might not want the priestesses to instantly die because the priestesses will basically die when they transfuse you and you get into a blood pool. You don't actually want to kill them first on Bolstering weeks. You don't want to just bolster the whole rest of the pack 3 times. So just use your brain and plan out when you want the priestesses to die. It's usually great if they're the last things to die in the pack.
I mean, dude, they could bolster up to 10 stacks and they will just instantly kill themselves with their transfuse.
Exactly. So that's a good strategy there. And for Sanguine, it's a little bit. Sanguine generally offers the same kind of incentives as Bolstering for when you want mobs to die. It's just a little bit less punishing if you do it the other way around. So that's something that this is another dungeon where that's you can just be aware of that. Make sure you're not dropping Sanguine in the middle of your pull too much.
Yep. And then we got Priestess Alunza,
another buffed
has
boss.
Been recently buffed. Yeah, the Legion of buffed Atal'Dazar. So basically, Priestess Alunza, she'll end up spawning these gold ads every 30 seconds, I believe. And basically, the meta for that CCs them. You got Root, Para, Blind.
Yep.
I don't know what else you can use. Banish. Warlocks can banish it.
That is true. Warlocks can banish it. That is correct. Well done. Imprison doesn't work, right?
think Prism works. Can you hex it?
I don't think so.
I don't know. Most of the time you see a root or paralysis on them. Freezing trap. You can
Freezing trap
it.
them. Yep. That's the good stuff right there. Yep. And so usually you only need to actually hard CC 2 of them, and then the third one you can just like ring a piece it, and the boss will be dead before it actually reaches a pool from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, this boss dies on a pretty pretty consistent timer, because usually she'll just die right before or during her third transfusion. That's when she'll have done 75% of her health to herself, and she'll die on that. And yeah, the ads will have been taken care of. If you don't have CC for them, you can just cleave them down as well, or focus them as they spawn. That works too. Hit them with a big stun and just have the boss be next to them and they die. That totally is a viable strategy also. Lots of damage on this boss fight now, so you have to be aware of it. If you have an offensive purge, it's really good. MDI teams often don't have an offensive purge, so the tank is going to take pretty big damage during the Gilded Claws.
That's magic damage too, right?
Yeah.
It's like fire.
Yeah, it's we can check in MDT. Gilded Claws. No, making their melee swings deal 300% physical damage for 6 seconds.
Okay. Ooh.
Yeah.
That kind of hurts.
We'll have to see exactly what teams end up doing to handle that, because Resto Druid, Triple Outlaw, Prot Warrior does not have an offensive purge. Especially you're playing Alliance, so you can't even Belfit or anything.
I mean, but you're playing a Prot Warrior, man. You're not dying.
Yeah, well, they can just, 6 seconds shield block lasts that long, so you're fine. Just shield block it, and
yeah, exactly. You're probably chilling.
Shield block, very similar to Divine Shield against physical attacks. Complete immunity as far as I'm concerned.
Very, very unfortunate truth of Prot Warrior in the current game.
Yep. So that's the answer to that. You got to dodge the yellow balls, or you'll just die. Those things will one shot you. And the healer has
get a dispel from the healer.
Yeah, get some dispels there quick. And then also that when you stand in the pools, you take a pretty sizable dot until the transfusion's over. So don't step into the pools immediately. It used to be that you would just get in the pools you get into them really early, but now you should wait until the transfusion is just about to start, because the dot will be removed from you when it ends. So that's a strategy update from Season 2 on this boss. Then after that, the only thing left is Yasma. And Yasma, you'll just run there. Sometimes there will still be trash, depending on an MDI pull. Your MDI strategy, you might have trash to do between Alunza and Yasma. You might have trash to do somehow after Yasma. I don't know. That's probably bad.
There's an emissary that'll stop the patrol of the middle pack too.
Right? Yeah, it's not on Enchanted Week. I don't think. I think
it's a Tides.
I think it's the Tides Week. The Tide emissary in the middle pack.
Yeah, so the Tides emissary in the middle pack actually just stops the middle pack from patrolling altogether. So you actually have to either Shroud, Shadow Meld, or just or you actually just end up having to kill the middle pack, right?
Or death skip it.
That can actually be kind of annoying. Or death skip it, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have to see actually. I don't know if this Enchanted Emissary stops the patrol. It might. It's in the same spot as the Tides Emissary. So
what was it from the Tides? I don't know. Okay, so for some reason there are emissaries that stop the patrol of the middle pack.
There are a lot of, and actually a lot of dungeons there are emissaries that stop patrols and put packs in interesting spots. So, but yeah, well, either way, if you're you have access to Shroud to get past it if you are playing with a rogue, and otherwise you might have to pull it or death skip it. And then you get to Yasma, last boss of the dungeon. Almost always a bloodlust. Yep.
Yeah.
Usually you'll bloodlust as soon as the first soul rend is over, although maybe you'll just do it right on pull. Particularly in MDI, doing it right on pull is pretty easy because those will just get deleted. And often if you're playing with a monk, this is a really good boss for monk because they can alternate between Ring of Peace and Leg Sweep for the soul rend ads. So that lets you take them really close to the boss and just cleave them down very easily with your Blade Flurries on your Outlaw Rogues.
Demon Hunter can also Chaos Nova, I believe, every single set.
Yeah, I think if they're not playing Fell Eruption, then that's an option for them. And
exactly. I mean, just in general, just making sure that you dodge out the spiders is normally pretty much the name of the game.
A good rotation for the boss. There are a couple different strategies that work, but basically the theory that you need to be going for is you need to keep the spiders grouped. So as players, you need to kind of all be standing pretty close together to each other so that the spiders are always running in the same direction. And then you kind of just wait for the spiders to get close to you. You wait for another spawn of spiders to happen right where the old spiders are, and then you move the boss, and you keep those spiders in a nice tight clump, and that will keep the fight safe even if there are a ton of spiders, as long as they're all close together.
I mean, honestly, as long as you're not ahead of your group, you're normally okay. you do not want to be out in the middle of the room or anything, but you are allowed to be behind the group, especially as like a caster.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that are not in front of the group.
Yeah, if you're leading the boss, then you're going to be spawning spiders in front of your friends, and that's where you don't want the spiders to be. Although, again, if there are some 1 or 2 lone spiders, you can always dodge them. It's more, the problem really starts to become when there's multiple spiders in a spot that you're trying to walk through.
There's also some abilities that you can actually jump over the spiders. I know Demon Hunter double jump. What is it? Stag form wild charge. I know you can heroic leap. Can you grapple over the spiders?
Jump grapple does give you clearance over spiders for some of the path. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So stuff like that, you can actually jump over the spiders if you're in a really bad spot and you need to drop your soul rend somewhere. In general, though, you should probably not be looking to blow up any spiders at all, even if you do have an immunity.
Right.
But those are also options as well.
People ask me this actually.
Use a bubble or.
They ask me all the time when I'm streaming why I don't cloak and clear all the spiders, and I think this is something that people do in pugs pretty often. Actually, is they'll like blow an immunity and clear up half the spiders. The problem with that is that the difference between 30 spiders and 15 spiders in terms of how much room space is denied is pretty close to 0. That's pretty much the same thing. And if you clear spiders, you then have just a bunch of garbage pools on the map for an extra minute that you're going to have to worry about, and that's bad. So
saving your immunity to kind of clear out any spiders that may end up impeding your.
Yeah, if there's a spider that's like, if you're about to die to a spider, immunity and don't die. But intentionally immune soaking a bunch of spiders is not a good strategy, I think. So I'd try and avoid doing that.
So that's probably it for Yasma.
Yep, and that's the dungeon. Okay. That's Atal'Dazar for the most part. We do have a question from. Actually, first let's just talk. So I guess we've covered less timings throughout the day, right? In MDI, you're just going to lust the first thing you do, and usually Yasma or maybe something right at the end of the dungeon, a big trash pull of some time. On live, your first lust is either the trash pull to the left or RowsOn. Your second lust is usually either Volkoff or the trash after Volkoff, and your third lust is Yasma.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's I basically I would move your lust around so you have lust for Volkoff if it's either Grievous, Tyrannical, or both. Maybe not on Tyrannical, but Grievous. I would absolutely look at having lust for Volkoff.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from our Twitter. Remember, you can always ask us questions on Twitter, even just at random times. Just tweet us questions, and we'll answer them on our next show if we can, if they're relevant. But we'll always have a tweet before we record our show where you can ask questions. This one was pretty close to the time that we actually recorded this, so we didn't get a huge amount of time to collect questions. But we do have one from at
Titanforge WoW.
Yeah, at Titanforge WoW. That's us. That's us. Follow us. At real_moppy asks, I encountered, maybe only with teaming, sometimes one extra pack on the way to Volkoff. For one run it's there, the next it isn't. Did you notice this as well? Tettles, what is happening with teaming in Atal'Dazar?
So basically, it's RNG is the core of it. So sometimes you end up getting like an extra pack on the left side. Sometimes you end up getting an extra pack on the right side. Basically, if you have an extra pack on the left side, you won't have the extra pack on the right side. If you have the extra pack on the right side, you won't have the extra pack on the left side. Sometimes you get neither. And it's just like, all right, well, I don't even know what the hell's going on anymore.
Yeah, there's just like, so there's 3 RNG teaming spawns on teaming.
Dratnos is drawing it on screen right now. Basically, oh man, how do we explain
this? Okay, so on the right-hand side, between those 2 Totem 3-packs, there's an extra Totem 3-pack with double Honor Guard and a Witch Doctor that can spawn. That one is pretty obnoxious. Again, you can shroud past it, but you can't actually walk by it like you can walk by some of the Totem packs. It'll aggro, it'll proxy you along the way there, so you do need to shroud a little earlier if you get that one. You still have enough time to do 1 shroud into Volkoff's room if that one's active, but that one can exist there. On the left-hand side, you either get, you can get 2 extra, you can get a Juggernaut and a Confessor into the pull that normally is Juggernaut, Augur, Confessor. That's part of that first pull. So that instead of being 6 enemies, that first pull would now be 8 with 2 Confessors and 3 Juggernauts. So that gets really hard. It's still doable with Outlaw Rogues. You still can just assign 1 to each Confessor and then have all your other kicks on the Augur. But you need 2 Outlaw Rogues basically for that to be a viable pull. Or the other teaming pull that can RNG spawn is double Colossus Confessor right after that first pull on the left. That one basically just says, you're not going to proceed any
can't
further in
hold
this
that.
direction. Yeah.
You shall not pass. Yeah, pretty much.
So that's what teaming does in Atal'Dazar. It's the only dungeon, as far as I know, where there is an RNG component to teaming, and it's so weird. And I wish they would get rid of it.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, sometimes you just get neither of them, and then you're just like strapped for count. And you're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and with beguiling, you can actually count's kind of easier to make up than it used to be because you're getting some count from emissaries that you weren't before. But still, yeah, on teaming weeks, you just have to pull like the whole dungeon to get your count. Often, middle pack, as you were talking about earlier, is a good addition on teaming weeks because it's just so much count and you need so much count. But yeah, that's Atal'Dazar on teaming. That's the deal with this dungeon, and that's been our guide to Atal'Dazar. Hope everybody's enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing this. So make sure that you guys follow us on Twitter at Titanforge Wow. Beyond that, make sure you check out the MDI this weekend. I know Dratnos and myself are going to be watching intently. I will be casting. Trell's going to be participating. Unfortunately, he was not with us this weekend, but I hope you guys enjoyed. I actually want some feedback on this one, so make sure that you guys tweet at us or leave comments down in the YouTube section for what you guys end up thinking about this. I would like to continue doing these. I think these are kind of cool, especially while we were doing this MDI stuff and kind of had these.
I think this works nicely for pre-recorded content as well, because like
I would agree.
But do let us know. Let us know on Twitter. Let us know on iTunes as well.
Yeah, because we can still talk, because we're also going to pepper in some like metagame discussions or like major gameplay changes or anything else that ends up happening. So
yeah. But yeah, there's still 9 dungeons left that we haven't done one of these episodes for. So we are ready and willing to do 9 more of these if it's popular. But if you all hate it, this can be the only one. Just let us know.
Yeah, kind of the pilot episode for this. So. Thank you guys for tuning in. We do appreciate it.
Yep, we'll be back next week sometime. Still figuring out exactly what the deets are. Check us on Twitter.
It will be live on all of our YouTube channels and on wherever you get podcasts.
Yep,
to that.
but not on Twitch still. So yeah, we'll see you guys then, and bye.
Later, guys.